Welcome to Chestnut Hill Cemetery for the annual Historic Cemetery Tour. This tour is done each year in October, and it's an opportunity to come into the cemetery and learn about the folks that are buried here. The cemetery was incorporated in 1863, and there's many families from the surrounding area that are buried here. And each year we research the history of the cemetery, the folks that are here, and we bring in historical reenactors to tell their story. And so we hope that you enjoy the tour and learn a little bit about the history of East Brunswick. So Chestnut Hill Cemetery was incorporated in 1863. It's what's known as a garden-style cemetery. These were cemeteries that were very popular during the 1800s. They were designed with the landscape in mind, and as you walk through the cemetery, you'll see that. It's situated on Chestnut Hill, on this wonderful rolling terrain, and it's by no accident that it was set up that way. When they were looking to lay out the cemetery in the 1860s, they were looking for these landscape features to incorporate into the design. And these styles of cemeteries were immensely popular throughout the 1800s.
Good evening. My name is Julia Yates. I was born in 1887, and I grew up in the village of Old Bridge, which is just down the hill from here. I was a school teacher, and I enjoyed playing music. I was proficient in the mandolin and piano, and I wrote many of my own songs. I composed many on the piano. I was married to Milton Carpenter, who was also a school teacher and principal in the neighborhood school. We both enjoyed music, and we had one son. His name was Malcolm Carpenter. Malcolm was born in 1912. Unfortunately, my husband passed away from the flu epidemic when he was just 36 years old, and our son Malcolm was only 6 then. When Malcolm grew up, he became a commercial artist. He did many advertisements, including for car companies and also for shoe stores and also playbills. And when he got a little older, he moved to Chicago and worked for a large advertising agency. I married a second time after Milton passed away, and I married Walter Yates. He was also a school teacher at the village schools there, and we both enjoyed music as well. We purchased a radio, which was very rare back in the 1930s. Only about 40% of people owned radios then, and so we would often have listening parties and invite friends and family to come over, and had a very nice time doing that. I grew up in this village and lived there my whole life. I lived there from 1887 until I passed away in 1971. I saw so many changes. Like Old Bridge Turnpike here. Back then, most of this area was farmland, and this road was a toll road. They would charge 3 cents to travel by horse and wagon, and 1 cent to walk on the road. And then later on, I got to see the New Jersey Turnpike, which was also a toll road. Quite a change. And when I was earlier in life, I was able to shop at the Appleby General Store, which unfortunately closed after 134 years in business when the supermarkets opened in the 1950s. But I got to see such a change from shopping in the general store to the large supermarkets and malls that opened on Route 18. I also got to see women get the right to vote, and electricity and automobiles. It was quite an exciting life I lived. Well, I thank you for visiting me. You'll see tonight my father, James K Sylvester, so please say hello to him. Have a good night.
Good evening. My name is James K Sylvester. I was born in the village in 1851. I married my wife, Sarah, and we had 6 kids. One of them, Julia, you will meet here tonight. Sadly, I had a son that served at Camp Dix, and he passed away from the 1918 flu epidemic. In the village, I was a carpenter. I built many of our houses here in the village. One of our main things that the residents did was order their housing material from Sears and Roebuck's catalog. So the train would come to the main train station and drop off the housing materials that I would put together. In addition to carpentry, I was a cigar shop confectionery store, and a pocket billiards hall. Our pocket billiards hall was very popular for all the Old Bridge men to come, socialize, and drink. So we challenged a lot of towns nearby to pocket billiards, and we often won. I don't know if you know this, but traditionally, billiards was a lawn game, not a table game. It was played similar to croquet. Then later down the line, the men wanted to do something inside, so we added 6 pockets to a table, and we put green felt to resemble grass. Now, over time, billiards were moved into pool halls where horse betting was taking place, because once again, the men wanted something to do between horse races. So in 1911, my store was robbed. I call it the first version of Let's Make a Deal. There was 2 drawers, one with $80 in it, and the other with $150. The robber, when I was not there, the robber chose drawer 1, which he stole $80 from my office. Pretty much my life was just pocket billiards, cigars, candy, and carpentry. I died in the village in 1915 at the age of 64. My 6 children were Julia, James Ellsworth, Loretta, Milton, and Fanny. So thank you for visiting me today, and hope you have a great evening and enjoy the tour.
Good evening. My name is Dr. Anna Braun. I'm a retired East Brunswick Public Schools teacher, and I'm on staff with the East Brunswick Museum. This evening, I'm going to be talking about a very difficult subject. It's a tragic past that happened here in East Brunswick. Now, in the center, I have examples of newspaper clippings. These are from a New Brunswick newspaper. They date from between 1792 and 1825. They are ads for human beings. One from July of 1809 reads, "A black boy, 9 years old, smart, active, and every way promising for a child of his years, is offered for sale, either for life or term of years." Right here in Chestnut Hill Cemetery, we have the grave site of people that were enslaved by Abraham Barkaloo. Abraham Barkaloo was a wealthy landowner. He owned property in South River and up into East Brunswick. In the 1980s, a housing development was being built on this grave site, so archaeologists removed the remains, and now these people rest here at Chestnut Hill Cemetery. The original fieldstone marker marks their location as well as a modern monument. We don't know the names of these people, but we have some idea of how many slaves Abraham Barkaloo owned. In 1908, Abraham Barkaloo made his last will and testament. He wrote, "I, Abraham Barkaloo, considering my mortality, do make this my last will. I give and bequeath under Abraham, son of Stephen Barkaloo, Negroes Frank, Dick, and Kate." He goes on to name 9 enslaved people, while others go unnamed. Now, we don't know what happened to these enslaved people mentioned in Abraham Barkaloo's will. He died in 1814. Now, 4 years later, in 1818, there was a further scandal with a slave ring run by a man named Judge Jacob Van Wickle. He was a Middlesex County judge, and he doomed 137 lost souls to permanent slavery in Louisiana. These were men, women, children, some as young as 2 days old, that he illegally sold and signed removal papers for. They were being sent to Louisiana, where his brother-in-law, his 3 sons, owned cotton plantations. And so these children and mothers were sent there for a life of servitude. Now, in 1814, a law attempted to limit human trafficking by making it illegal for slaves to be transferred over state lines without their consent. Judge Van Wickle and his henchmen used a loophole in the law. They took children and babies from their mother's arms to interview them to gain their consent to be sold south. When the child cried, The judge took that as their consent and signed off on the transfer papers. The mother was told, your child is going to Louisiana. Do you agree to go too? So, of course, the mother isn't going to abandon their child, so they had to consent also. Here's a document that we have on my board, signed by Judge Van Wickle, stating that Phyllis and her son Charles, age 1 year, 6 months, had freely consented to be sold as slaves and shipped to Louisiana. The location of Judge Van Wickle's property where these people were entrapped is only a quarter of a mile from here, near the intersection of Old Bridge Turnpike and Main Street. For more information on what happened here, I refer you to the Lost Souls Memorial Project. They have a Facebook page there. Another good website for learning about slavery and how it impacted people in Middlesex County is Rutgers University's website, Scarlet and Black. Let me leave you with a thought. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, but the silence over that by the good people." Thank you.
This was the kind of imagery that started appearing down here, and it's a more hopeful imagery, obviously. The Baroque period in Europe had already concluded, all right? And there's a lot of winged putti and cherubs flying around in all the paintings. Sculptures started featuring them, angels, the whole bit, all right? And when they started appearing on funerary monuments for the rich over here want what the rich over there had. It's as simple as that. So there is also a slight waning in the orthodoxy in the Puritan culture up there. And so these stones were starting to wheedle their way in a little bit. So you had a little bit, they weren't less religious. They were just challenging a little bit and getting what they want. Besides, they were rich. So what do you get when you're rich? You get what you want. These started appearing on the gravestones for fashion, economic reasons, art reasons. And they're more hopeful imagery, but you notice that angel is not smiling. And a lot of them didn't. Okay, so it's still a scowl, it's still a little bit skeptical whether or not you're going to heaven. Okay. The last phase in which the Silcox family, oops, I gave it away. I'm Henry. Okay, nice Henry. To meet you. I'm dead. And that, oh wait, I get to do it. Let's see, this is a good one. Yeah. Yes. Go. Spirit Halloween, baby. It's great. So neoclassical phase came in. They discovered Herculaneum in Pompeii in 1720s, okay? And Europe went gaga. It was just like, oh my God, look at those togas. It was fascinating. Everybody was wearing these things, you know, Animal House came out of that. And then you had broken columns, Roman sarcophagi, you had weeping willow trees, and funerary urns. Those were the biggies, okay? And there's actually a column down that hill, you'll notice, a beautiful cylindrical column in granite, okay? All it means, and just like this one, all it means is someone famous or someone of note has toppled, and a pillar of our community is gone. It's as simple as that, but it's all pure fashion. It has nothing to do about your spiritual fate anymore. And as I mentioned, this is didactic, talking to the dead or speaking to the living. Same here, but that's basically this, hey, I'm fashionable, you know, and basically it was the living speaking to the other living about their deceased loved one. So the attitudes about life after death definitely change, and this is a Western culture thing. This isn't totally like an American thing at all, okay? So they put me up here to tell you that, and also to say that prior to the 1870s, this is the way stone cutting was done. Okay, everything was manual. They didn't invent pneumatic tools until the 1870s. Pneumatic hammer came in 1880. Steam drilling was experimented with in the 1850s. Industrial diamonds were used to carve a tunnel in the Swiss Alps in the 1860s. So it was really this latter part of the 19th century that real stone cutting progressed, and it made it more economically feasible for the harder stones like granite to become used and for gravestones. So you'll start seeing a lot of those in this cemetery in the latter part of the 19th century. Okay. Originally it was Jersey sandstone, quarried out of Newark in the earliest days. They had quality deposits there. They built the Prudential Center on top of dead people. The old First Presbyterian burial ground was there till the 1960s. Then they ripped it up and put a very essential parking lot. And after that, they ripped it up in 2000 and went, oops, looks like we missed somebody. Is that an iron coffin? So stuff like that. Yeah, real necessary, but that's Newark for you. But again, and you'll find a lot of Newark gravestones and from Newark stonecutters in Trinity Churchyard in Manhattan. Sandstone is also featured from New Jersey for the building of Trinity Church itself. So, but it did fall out of fashion for marble. What is behind you and that big pinkish stone over there is actually like a pink sugar marble. It holds up well enough, but it does erode. Okay, so that's why 19th century cemetery stones are often harder to read. It's a metamorphic stone, so it takes form better. That's why Michelangelo used marble. Okay, but he used better quality marble. Sandstone, on the other hand, delaminates and flakes off, kind of like slate, because of its sedimentary nature. So as long as the face stays on the stone, you can read sandstones from the 1720s and 30s here in New Jersey, northern and central New Jersey. But marble markers can often be very difficult because acid rain and pollution have just oftentimes taken their toll. And you'll notice they blacken. And as you go up the hill, there are 3 orange flags. The first one you come to with that slanted marker is the oldest stone in the cemetery, 1838. I believe it's for a child, but I can't remember the name on it. And the next 2 over are by my sons. Since I died in 1846, and we know the cemetery was established in 1861, I'm not in here, but my son's work is, and it's that gorgeous Rogers obelisk up there. Yes, and I'm going to put strobes on it later, so, you know, if you're kind of winding away down there and you want to look up and see the light show, we're at one of the tallest points in Middlesex County, I believe, right here. And if you look down beyond that yellow tree at the distance there, you get a great view of Route 18. Anyway, so, yeah, I'm telling you. Yeah, well, you know, I might as well have a little fun while I'm alive again. So, we sold the business. My son sold the business in 1876, 30 years after my death, and we sold it to the Kilbournes, and they put a nice ad in the paper. We were too cheap and frugal, which is why our gravestones were also very simple, cheap, and frugal. We're in Willow Grove Cemetery in New Brunswick. You all notice the genetic resemblance there. No variation there. And so, yeah, like I said before, come and visit at some point. And
Hi, my name is Patrick Bamburek. I'm the great-great-great-grandson of artist James Crawford Tom, who was buried here in Chestnut Hill Cemetery. James Crawford Tom was born in 1835 in New York City, and he was a noted artist, landscape artist, genre, Hudson Valley School style of his art. At the age of 24, he went to France to study painting with such noted painters as Pierre-Edouard Frère. Louis Comfort Tiffany was a contemporary of his in an artist colony in France. And it was in France where James Crawford Tom met his wife, Louise. They had 6 children together. Their eldest son, Salvatore, is also buried here in Chestnut Hill. His eldest daughter, Ada, is my great-great-grandmother, and she's also the mother of New Jersey Governor Harold Hoffman, who was in office from 1935 to 1938. James Crawford Tom's paintings are part of the Smithsonian collection. The East Brunswick Museum also has a significant collection of James Crawford Tom paintings, and I encourage everyone to go to the museum to see them. You can visit the East Brunswick Museum on their website, get the information, but it is a very impressive collection that they have. James Crawford Tom, a noted painter and a resident of Chestnut Hill Cemetery. Thank you.
Hello, hi, I'm Congressman Theodore Frank Appleby. I was born in the village of Old Bridge on October 10th, 1864. I moved to Asbury Park, where I was mayor for 2 terms from 1908 to 1912. I also ran the T. Frank Appleby Company, one of the largest real estate offices along the East Coast. I was a congressman for the 3rd District of New Jersey, which included Middlesex, Monmouth, and Ocean counties. I ran in the 1920 election and won. I was a Republican in what was known as a dry. In other words, I stood foursquare for the enforcement of the 18th Amendment, also known as Prohibition. The 18th Amendment prohibited the manufacture, sale, and transportation of any intoxicating liquors, and the Volstead Act enforced this. I believe alcohol threatens the institution of the family, and drunkenness results in a rise of crime, poverty, and violence. I was elected once again in 1924. Unfortunately, I did not get to live to serve a second term, as I would pass away on December 15th, 1924. I am buried here with my wife, Mrs. Alice Hoffman. We had 3 boys, Harry, Stuart, and Theodore. Stuart would follow in my footsteps and become a congressman himself. I see many of you here without hats. Well, back in my day, a hat was a part of a man's wardrobe. You couldn't go out without one. This year marked the 100th anniversary of the straw hat riots. Tradition was to switch from a straw hat to felt hat, like this one here, on September 15th, and then back again on March 15th. If a straw hat was worn after September 15th, hooligans could come and remove your hat and smash it to bits. Well, in 1922, a gang of youth decided to start 2 days early. They used sticks with hooks to knock straw hats off and smash them. This sparked a riot that shook New York City from the Battery to the Bronx. Could you imagine rioting over hats? You will notice some newspaper articles about my election into Congress. Make sure you vote. As you exit the cemetery, notice the cemetery gates. There's a plaque with my name on it since I donated the money for them. Thank you so much for visiting and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Hello, my name is Emily Green. I was born in this area in 1902. I lived my whole life in Browntown, and I died in this area in 1918, just 10 days shy of my 16th birthday. My parents, Robert and Amelia Green, who were married in secret when my grandmother went on vacation, owned a farm around here. I was the third of their 8 children. Growing up on a farm, I would have spent most of my time helping out, and as a result, I only went to school up until the 8th grade, at which point I dropped out to work on the farm full time. My chores on the farm would have involved cleaning, taking care of animals, collecting eggs, and planting crops using something like this, which was used to plant corn. After school, I might have used something like this, called a stereoscope, which was used to make images appear 3D. Although my death was relatively uneventful, my father's was not. He was raccoon hunting one November in 1914. He came back around 1 a.m. after dropping off his brother and his friends. He then dozed off in the front seat of the wagon with a kerosene lamp like this between his legs. It tipped over and he woke up to find his pants on fire, at which point he jumped out of the wagon. The horse, knowing its way back to the farm, pulled the burning wagon all the way back, and my father would have crawled over a mile home with his clothes burnt off. Dr. Ira Crandall, East Brunswick's town doctor, was then called. He recommended my father be sent to a hospital, and he died days later. This would have left my mother with a farm, 8 children, and a war going on in Europe, which was already beginning to affect people in the United States. When the war finally came to the United States, my mother and my family would have been asked to ration foods like bread and meat and participate in activities such as knitting socks to help support troops. I passed away 4 years later, on August 14th, 1918. Although my death is attributed to anemia, 1918 was the year of the Spanish flu pandemic, and many who died of the flu did not want that officially recorded, as they feared that evidence of an epidemic in the United States could be seen as a weakness by the Germans.